Before I begin, I want to be clear about what this video is and is not. This video is not an accusation against any specific victim, accused person, advocate, nonprofit, law enforcement agency, domestic violence organization, or government office. I am not claiming that every person who says they are being gang-stalked is telling the truth, and I am not claiming that every domestic violence response involves harassment or misconduct. This is a research-based theory about possible overlap between online gang-stalking claims and real-world systems that already exist, including coordinated community response, domestic violence prevention, victim advocacy, offender accountability, risk assessment, and multi-agency public safety models. The purpose is to examine patterns, public documents, institutional structures, and legal gray areas, not to encourage anyone to confront, investigate, expose, contact, or harass private individuals. Because this topic involves domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault allegations, mental health, public safety, and private people, comments are turned off. Gang stalking goes by many names: cause stalking, organized harassment, community stalking, coordinated stalking, and more. People who believe they are experiencing it often refer to themselves as targeted individuals, or TIs. There are countless explanations online for what gang stalking is, who may be behind it, and why someone believes they have become a target. A quick search will bring up websites, forums, and Reddit threads, some with tens of thousands of weekly views, all filled with differing theories. There are so many, and some are so extreme, that it becomes easy to dismiss the entire topic as mass delusion or untreated mental illness. But when you look past the more sensational claims, certain patterns begin to appear. Many people describe similar tactics: social isolation, reputational damage, surveillance-like behavior, intimidation, baiting, community rumors, workplace interference, and coordinated pressure. My opinion is that, in many cases, people may first notice a real-world tactic being used against them, then go online searching for an explanation. Once they find the gang-stalking community, they may be pulled into a much larger rabbit hole of theories, interpretations, and fear. And what they come out believing is anyone's guess. What I find interesting is that gang-stalking claims are often treated socially and clinically as evidence of paranoia or delusional thinking. But in the criminal justice system, the question is usually more complicated. A person can hold irrational or paranoid beliefs and still be found legally competent if they understand the proceedings and can assist in their defense. Yet when these incidents end with the person being killed, whether by police, by another individual, or during the event itself, the public explanation often shifts. News reports, law enforcement statements, and public commentary may frame the person primarily as mentally ill. So why is that? Why is the same belief treated as evidence of serious mental illness in one context, but not necessarily enough to change how the legal system evaluates responsibility, intent, or competency in another? That does not mean a person should automatically be excused from responsibility, but it does raise an important question about how we separate mental illness, legal competency, criminal intent, and public safety when someone's entire worldview is shaped by the belief that they are being hunted, monitored, or provoked. There just seems to be a major disconnect here. And that disconnect made me look at the issue from a different angle. Not just whether the person making the claim is mentally ill, but whether the person may have been identified by others as dangerous. Because when institutions believe someone poses a serious risk, especially a risk of violence, the response can shift from punishment after a crime to prevention before something happens. That is where domestic violence becomes important. Domestic violence cases are one of the areas where law enforcement, courts, advocates, employers, families, and communities are often asked to take warning signs seriously before the worst-case scenario happens. These cases can involve risk assessments, safety planning, protective orders, victim advocacy, workplace alerts, housing changes, firearm restrictions, and coordinated community responses. In other words, domestic violence is already treated as an issue where multiple systems may work together to prevent escalation. My hypothesis is that at least some cases described as gang stalking may actually be connected to a coordinated community or multi-agency response to allegations of domestic violence. More specifically, I want to explore whether people accused of domestic abuse, especially those deemed high risk for reoffending or escalating to lethal violence, may become the focus of informal or formal preventive strategies. These strategies could involve monitoring, social pressure, reputational exposure, isolation from certain communities, or tactics that could provoke behavior leading to arrest or incarceration. In other words, what some people call gang stalking may in some cases be interpreted as a kind of informal reverse sting or predictive prevention model. Not necessarily one official program, but a pattern of people and institutions trying to stop future harm before it happens. So I chose to look at this from as objective a view as possible, while also considering the possibility that what people describe as gang stalking could be connected to a specific style of investigation or community-based intervention. I decided to break this into 3 parts. In part 1, I want to look at when the modern gang stalking belief system appears to have entered public consciousness, because the timing matters. In part 2, I want to look at how something like this could legally and structurally work without requiring one obvious command center. And in part 3, I want to look at why domestic violence response, coordinated community response, VAWA funding, family justice centers, and domestic violence high-risk teams are the systems I think deserve closer examination. Part 1. When did the modern gang stalking belief system begin? It is important to identify when an idea first entered the public consciousness, because that helps narrow down what may have been happening socially, culturally, legally, or technologically around the time it emerged. Despite what some people claim online, gang stalking, as we understand it today, does not appear to have been around for centuries. Have there been historical examples of communities ostracizing, shunning, or targeting individuals? Of course. Have there been people throughout history who believed that powerful or hidden forces were out to harm them? Again, of course. Did the FBI have programs like COINTELPRO? Obviously. But the modern idea of gang stalking, as a widespread, coordinated, community-based harassment campaign involving surveillance, street theater, workplace interference, and social isolation, does not appear to have been part of global public consciousness for centuries. From what I found, the modern concept appears to have started gaining traction around late 2005 to early 2006. The exact month can vary slightly depending on when and how you search, but the pattern is consistent. The term begins appearing around 2006 and grows from there. Even worldwide, the data points to around January 2006 as the starting point. That matters because this pattern looks different from older, established topics. Searches for something like aliens were already consistently present when Google Trends data begins in 2004. It also looks different from internet-amplified belief systems like Flat Earth, which had a much more visible online resurgence later on. Gang stalking appears to occupy a different pattern. It was not already widely searched when Google Trends begins, but it also does not appear to be a one-time viral trend. As far as websites go, the earliest dated website I could find that focused on gang stalking was created in Canada in 2004, and it is just a parked domain with ads. But even there, I could not find meaningful traffic or archive page activity until around 2006. As far as newspapers go, the earliest article I could find that resembled the modern idea of gang stalking was also from Canada in 2004. It discussed a woman who believed she was experiencing organized harassment. Interestingly, she did not appear to use the term gang stalking herself. That does not mean no one used the term before then. It means I have not found evidence that the modern meaning had entered broad public awareness before that period. Before that, the references I found to gang stalking were not about the modern conspiracy theory. They were usually about youth gangs stalking people, or completely unrelated uses of the words, like a television listing describing the 1973 Clint Eastwood movie, Magnum Force. So, based on what I found, the modern gang stalking belief system does not appear to be ancient, centuries old, or even especially old. It appears to be a relatively modern internet-era belief system that entered broader search interest around 2006 and continued growing from there. That timing does not prove my theory, but it does give us a starting point. If the modern version of this belief system began gaining traction around 2006, then the next question is, what changed around that time that could have helped create, spread, or shape it? That is where part 2 begins. Before looking at domestic violence systems directly, we need to ask a practical question. If something like this were happening, how could it legally and structurally work? Because if the structure is possible, then the next question is no longer whether the experience sounds strange. The next question is whether the structure already exists.